One of the goals of the conference, as Pastor Mark has said, and we were talking about last night, was to get the grantees together, and so that they could hear amongst themselves, and the wider group could hear what's been done with the grants that 5121 gave in furtherance of freedom of the gospel. So what we're going to do now is to call each of the grantees up. I'm going to go in the order that's in the program, so I'm not going to read what they did. They will certainly talk about that, but if you want to, you can take a look at those, and that's a quick synopsis of what the grant was and what they're doing with it. And it's about 10 to 12 minutes we have, and Eric is in the back. He's going to be the timekeeper. So he said he'll give a 2-minute warning. So he's going to be the timekeeper, and I appreciate that. So as I said, we'll go in the order that it's in the program. So the first group is Luther House, and Sarah Stenson and Chris Krogan are the representatives there. And if you just go up to the pulpit, those of you that are going to speak from the pulpit. We have a good mic there. And there you go. Take it away, Luther House.
Don't applaud yet. You haven't seen anything or heard anything. My name is Sarah Stenson. I'm the CEO at Luther House. I'm also on faculty at the seminary. We brought most of our team because we wanted y'all to get to know them. Our mission at Luther House is strengthening Lutheran ministries for the proclamation of the gospel. We do that through 3 communities: current pastors, pastors we're training, and congregations. So first I'm going to hand it to Lars Olsen. Lars is the director of pastoral formation and pretty much anything else we ask him to do. He's going to talk about congregational outreach.
So for years, congregations have been asking Luther House to produce some resources that they could use, especially around confirmation. And of course, Gerhard Ferde and Jim Nessigan are famous for producing a confirmation resource on the Small Catechism called Free to Be. And you can't really improve on a classic like this. And so it's difficult to update this or make it different. But that was the task. And so we didn't want to update it or change it or put our own spin on it, but rather to do what that curriculum, that book would do for people, which is what the beginning of the book says. Announce that God has made a decision about you, and that decision is to join you to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So what we have produced are 25 Bible videos and 25 videos on the catechism that are geared towards middle schoolers and maybe even adults using these that can be used in a variety of ways in congregations. So in the next year or so, those will be rolling out. The videos will be rolling out, and you can find the curriculum, the online curriculum that is free on our website. And we have a sample of that with us today. One of the Bible videos that hasn't been released. This is the premiere, and you get to see it.
When God makes a promise, He keeps it. But receiving that promise doesn't mean the events of the world or your experiences will be easy and that life will go smoothly. In fact, it's just the opposite. God's promise goes with you into the hardest, darkest, and most difficult times. In those desperate moments, it's the only hope you have left. In the years between 720 to 587 BC, Israel was conquered. This is called the Babylonian exile. The Israelites, while living in God's promised land, were invaded by foreign nations. The invaders burned the temple and destroyed the protective walls around Jerusalem. They burned homes and grabbed anything of value. The deepest blow, however, was that they took the Israelites captive, removing them from the promised land and making them exiles in Babylon. The Book of Lamentations expresses the grief and pain caused by that exile. Loneliness, despair, loss, and uncertainty fill the pages while offering no answers or guidance. As it confesses, "This is awful. I cannot take it." And yet, in the middle of the Lamentations, where you would not expect it, there's a word of hope. When all else is taken away, it says, "This I call to mind. steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. This is how God's promise does its work. When all else is lost, God's word of promise is your sure hope. Naturally, when things go wrong, the nagging questions spin. What could I have done differently? What should I have done? What can I do to fix this? But having a promise from God stops your mind from spinning. Instead, faith clings to God's promise, trusting in God's faithfulness, and puts the question back on God. How are you, O Lord, going to keep your promise now? It might seem rather bold to put God on the spot, even uncomfortable. That's exactly what God expects you to do. Hold God to His word. That's why God gave you His promise, so that in times of trouble, you have a word to cling to from your unfailing, faithful God. And God takes boldness to a new level. With His people in exile, lamenting loss and suffering in despair, God speaks to the prophet Ezekiel and shows him a valley filled with bones that are very, very dry. The vision communicates not just death, but the hopelessness of death. Bones remain when life is ended, but dry bones turn to dust and erase any record of those who have lived. In this hopeless valley of death, God asks Ezekiel, "Can these bones live?" Instead of answering the question, Ezekiel turns it right back to God, saying, "O Lord God, you know." In a valley of death, God tells Ezekiel to preach to the bones. What? Preach to the dead? They cannot possibly hear. But God's point is this: even these very dry bones will have new life when God's word arrives. God's faithfulness isn't restoring what has been lost, but is instead giving you a future. When all other hope is lost, then God's word alone is your sure hope. False hopes and vain wishes end when God's word arrives with true hope that grabs hold of you and pulls you out from the grave. As the prophet Ezekiel recognized, God's promise goes with you through death to new life.
That you can clap for, thank you. Quickly now, the next up is Ryan Gage. I will let Ryan tell a little bit about his story, but he'll talk about current ministry professionals or pastors.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Gage, and I serve as a pastor up in Eureka, South Dakota, about 12 miles south of the North Dakota border. So if you've never heard of it, yeah, that's okay. We're not kind of on the way to anywhere. But my involvement with Luther House has gone back, pretty much since I got to South Dakota about 14 years ago. And so I've been involved with using Luther House's resources, and it's been my relationship with the Luther House folks has been ongoing. But as time went by and things have changed, I actually got asked to lead the board. So I'm here in that capacity too. So first of all, as chair of the board, thank you to the 1521 Foundation for the support that allows stuff like this to go on, and the training of pastors in areas like where I'm at in rural South Dakota, where a couple of my close colleagues were Luther House students, and they're in congregations that would not be served by pastors otherwise. So it's great to be here to develop relationships with you all, and hope to get the chance to talk to you further.
Hi, my name is Deirdre Lapp. As community coordinator for Luther House, my primary responsibility is working with future ministry professionals. I meet with potential students from every Lutheran denomination, from lifelong Lutherans to those new in the faith. We meet over Zoom to find out what brings them to us and what they are hoping to accomplish. And then I help them discern the next steps, whether it's applying to seminary or maybe it's to audit a course in order to learn more. My title is community coordinator and not simply student coordinator, because much of my time is spent with helping pastors, lay leaders, and members of the community get access to our resources so that they can learn more about the Lutheran faith, what they believe, and why they believe it. When Chris and Sarah called me in the spring of 2022, asking me to help them out a couple of hours a week, I thought, sure, why not? There's a pandemic, I need a job. Little did I know just how busy I would become. Prior to receiving generous funding from the 1521 Foundation, we were running an average of 20 students per year. Now we are running close to 85 students, with the vast majority, 90%, planning on becoming pastors. And this year, in 2025, we already have 3 new students, and it's only at the end of January. Since 2022, we have invited over 85 auditors into our courses, 15 being pastors, and 20 of those auditors have become students. Everyone who comes to us brings with them a spiritual backpack of what they think Martin Luther believed according to Scripture. It is an honor to be the one to introduce them, many for the first time, the writings of Luther and Gerhard Forde, and then help them access high-quality theological resources along the way. Our program can be accessed around the world. And right now I'm helping a cohort of 6 students from the Congo, which is really exciting. They speak French, so I don't know what to say about that. But what I love the most about my work is the opportunity to hear people's stories, their faith stories, and how God ultimately led them to Luther House. Every story and every student is unique, and I'm happy to assist in any way that I can. I have only touched the tip of the iceberg, so if you'd like to hear a great story about a poster child of our program, come talk to me. I have several, but one that sticks out more than the others that I think will encourage you, not only about the work that we are doing, but the impact we are making in our Lutheran congregations. It is with much gratitude that I get to do what I do, and thank you for allowing me to share. And I also wanted to invite each one of you to audit one of our courses. It's phenomenal, but you will be apocalypsed.
I got 30 seconds, Eric? Okay, good. So we're just, again, a word of gratefulness. We've been in existence, this started in 2006. It's been slowly kind of limping along, doing what we do. But we're grateful, especially 1521, when you came and got behind us with this. As you can hear from Deirdre, we went from this to this, and it seems like we're going like this. And so our impact and everything is a result of your generosity, your understanding of mission, and our mission. And I'm glad that they coalesce, and we're looking forward to further mission with other people. So we're grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Luther House. Next organization is Grandview University, where the 1521 Foundation established a Gerhard Forde professorship. And we have the professor here. We have Mark Mattis and Tricia Wheelock.
Greetings from Iowa, where a week and a half ago, it was -11. I'm so pleased to be here today to share with you the impact 1521 has on Grandview University, on our students, and on the many networks that we have access to, the pastors that we work with in our various grant programs, and with high school students in our high school vocation program. A little bit first about Grandview. Founded more than 125 years ago in 1896, Grandview University offers a high-quality education to a diverse student body in a career-oriented liberal arts grounded curriculum in Des Moines, Iowa. the biggest metropolitan area in Iowa, with a whole 500,000 people. Grandview offers bachelor's and master's degrees and welcomes traditional students and adult learners representing a wide range of backgrounds. At Grandview, students find a winning combination of high-quality programs, experienced professors, and caring individuals. With approximately 1,800 students, an average class size of 16, and a student-to-faculty ratio of 12:1, students get to know their professors and other students as well. They learn independence and seek responsibility in Grandview's educational environment. Learning is an interactive process at Grandview. Students engage in lively discussions, work on real-world projects, and participate in career-related experiences. Grandview welcomes and supports students from a variety of walks of life and geographies and ethnicities. We also have a large number of first-generation college students. That's one of our niches, and that's such an exciting thing to watch students come realize a dream of getting to go to college and recognize the sacrifice that many of their families have made and the hopes that they had in sending their child to Grandview. Recently in the past, I was part of Grandview's strategic plan. I was part of President's Council and Executive Committee. I'm so thankful to be teaching and no longer have those responsibilities. But I did have the joy of helping rework our mission statement, vision statement, and values. And I'm just going to briefly share that with you. Grandview engages, equips, and empowers learners to explore their vocations, fulfill their potential, and serve the world. Enriched by its Danish Lutheran history, Grandview is a school for life. Our vision statement says, to be a leader in innovative education that integrates knowledge, learning skills, and transformational experiences to ignite curiosity and prepare adaptable, independent, creative, and confident people. And then our values, and you know universities and colleges argue about some of these words. These were what we finally settled on. Excellence, inclusive community, adaptability, faith, global curiosity, agility, and positivity. Unfortunately, we did have quite a spirited discussion about faith, but I'm really glad that that was included in there, and that was important to our university president and to a number of our board members. Our Lutheran heritage. As a Lutheran university, Grandview prepares students to do God's work in the world. Our Lutheran heritage teaches us that human endeavors are indeed a medium for God's love. Therefore, we aim to educate and inspire students to seek truth, think globally, care deeply, decide carefully, act ethically, and work diligently to improve life for all. Martin Luther's vision for the life of a Christian inspires Grandview to offer excellent liberal education combined with strong career preparation to prepare students to serve society. We encourage students to discern how their gifts, their talents, abilities, and passions can be put to use in family, community, and work settings for the benefit of others. This Lutheran understanding of vocation is an essential outcome of our core curriculum and is at the heart of our student advising, infused into campus culture. Grandview is committed to developing the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. We support students in their faith journeys and offer active, inviting campus ministry, religious programming, Bible studies, and pastoral care. Grandview is a university of the Lutheran Church, but exists to serve the world. Our educational practices and institutional values are shaped by and grounded in our Lutheran heritage and identity. A little bit more about our students. 98% of our students receive financial assistance. Compared to other private colleges in Iowa, Grandview is remarkably affordable, and we take great pride in that. 800 of our students live on campus. We have 40 clubs and organizations, 27 men's and women's athletic teams, and just this last December, our men's football team won the NAIA National Championship. I don't have the t-shirt, I didn't wear it today. Our students come from 40 different states, 50 different countries, and we boast a 98.6% job placement rate. That's a little bit about Grandview. More specifically about our theology major and what Mark and I do, Grandview requires all incoming students, all students, to take a class that fulfills a faith and meaning requirement. So we have the great privilege of seeing almost every student that walks through Grandview's doors. For our theology majors and minors, here are the classes we offer. Classes in world religions, Christian faith and life, Old Testament, New Testament, early Christian thinkers, life and thought of Luther, modern Christian thinkers, worship and the arts, poverty, racism, and power, introduction to philosophy, introduction to ethics, ancient and medieval philosophy, modern philosophy, independent studies, and all kinds of special topics. We also have a special relationship with campus ministry. Chapel is offered every week. Mark and I are active in our campus ministry, helping with Bible study, vocation week, doing retreats, and there are lots of ways for students to get involved in faith life on campus. We tell our students, come to Grandview because you can develop your faith through rigorous academic study. You can put your faith to work through campus ministry and service. You get to learn from experienced faculty who are committed to your education. I tell every student in every class, the goal is not just to show up, do your homework, and do well, but to walk across the stage in 4 years with that degree, because for many of them, that's an incredibly important thing for them and their family. When you come to Grandview, you're joining a vibrant, faith-based community where we're committed to serving our community. And you can improve your communication and leadership skills. That's a little bit about our theology department and theology major. As for the Gerhard Ferde position, the purpose of this professor is to extend the legacy of Gerhard Ferde, that late seminary professor, pastoral mentor, and faithful witness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Widely known for his radical Lutheran approach to the preaching and pastoral practice of the church's public proclaimers, this approach is present in much of his works that I get the joy of talking about to students and to pastors as they come to campus. He represents a strand of Lutheranism that took up his work, attending to both church history and the analysis of contemporary ecclesial matters through a confessional lens. In his decades of teaching at both Luther College in Decorah and Luther Seminary and its predecessors, Ferde introduced lay people, budding theologians, and prospective pastors to the thinking of Luther. He created a cadre of preachers and teachers who, to paraphrase Paul in 1 Corinthians 11:23, came to pass on what Ferde had first given them, a faith that frees and a hope that lasts. In my role as the Gerhard Ferde professor, these are my essential duties. Collaborate with campus ministry to introduce Ferde's theology to the student ministry team and to the university student body. Teach classes regularly incorporating dimensions of Ferde's work. Publish material and offer speaking engagements that include explicit and implicit aspects of Ferde's approach to theology and the Christian life. Collaborate with others to create and implement online and other resources to broaden the church's theological fluency, as well as support and enhance the ongoing proclamation of preachers who identify with Ferde's radical Lutheranism. And lastly, assist the president and the campus pastor of Grandview in defining, maintaining, and promoting a Lutheran identity at the university. To the 1521 Foundation, thank you so much for your support. In a time when many universities are facing difficult decisions, when humanities programs, when theology departments are shrinking, we still have 2 full-time theology professors that see almost all of our students. This grant has promoted strong relations within our own department, but also across campus. We have excellent and strategic relationships with folks in the business and finance office, advancement, the president's office, and the provost. And these are all important aspects of our work. And we get the joy of strengthening these relationships and continuing the good work to promote the university's Lutheran heritage. That's a little bit about Grandview, the Ferde professorship, and our theology major. I'm going to invite my colleague to come say a little bit more about the impact.
Yeah, I'm going to share some concrete ways that the 1521 Foundation Ferdy professorate has made a difference. I'm really very proud that at Grandview, in our theology department, that we teach lay people and our majors to think in terms of law and gospel, death and resurrection. There are many fine undergraduate institutions connected with the church. We are up front in our theology department to carry on law and gospel, death, resurrection, two kingdoms, the robust efficacy of the word in the sacraments that Steve referred to this morning. So that is rare, and we are proud of that. We want our students to be able to think as Lutherans. Even if they're not Lutherans, even if they don't have a background, they will understand those terms. That will be a part of their life, and they can either appropriate it or reject it, but they will know what it is. We're proud of our undergraduates who've gone on to go to the seminary. They get a heads up. They're already starting to think in these ways prior to going to seminary. And so that's something that we have honored, we worked at. The first Gerhard Ferdy professor at Grandview was Ken Sundant Jones. Ken was gifted in mentoring our majors. He was gifted in evangelizing, reaching out to all kinds of youth who were either unchurched or what I might call underchurched. The underchurched are youth that would tell me, well, I went to church with my grandma once or twice. He reached out to these people. We had great synergy when Russ Lackey was there, myself as well, that at least every year we would see maybe 2, 3, sometimes 4 baptisms a year on campus. We're very proud of that. Ken has kept up with the majors that have gone on and become pastors. He has worked with them in crafting sermons. So what he would be most widely known is this 1517 book called the Lutheran Toolkit. So beyond Grandview, this book has been used in many different congregations. Steve, it's available, is that not so? Yeah, and it was a bestseller, I believe. So I want to put that out there for you. Ken had this position for 3 semesters. During the time that he had it before it was passed on to Tricia, he was tasked by Brad Jensen to take a handwritten manuscript of Gerhard Ferdy's unfinished, and he digitalized it. On occasion, he'd come to me, what do you think this word is? And oh my goodness, we'd get a magnifying glass. There would be things that were crossed out and things written above. For the most part, we got it worked out. And so I think at this point, Ken is going through and creating the footnotes for this manuscript. I don't know what the future of that manuscript will be. Mrs. Ferdy had passed it on to Brad. So it's in Brad's hands, and whatever direction that he puts it. All I want to say is that we are so grateful to you. I'm a very nostalgic person. I could try to go into recovery. It's not going to work. I think it's just part of my DNA. And part of that nostalgia is a product myself of education, the colleges of the old American Lutheran Church. I am grateful to God for the education that I had. It helped, along with the seminary, to prepare me. We don't realize the importance of an undergraduate education. A lot of times when students go to the seminary, their mind's already made up. As undergraduates, they're an open book, and you can make a huge difference in mentoring them and shaping them for future ministry. I am grateful to God for the generosity of the 1521 Foundation. I'm grateful for your support in prayer. I'm grateful for Tricia, who is on top of things with the Ferdy professorate. So I just want to say thank you to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Grandview. Next organization is Lutheran Quarterly, who were given grants for an endowment and also an essay prize. And we have Paul Rorm and Nicholas Hopman.
Thank you. I'm Paul Roram, editor of Lutheran Quarterly. On behalf of the board of directors and the editorial staff, which includes Nick Hopman here as our managing editor, I want to thank the board and the foundation here in person at the Lutheran Church of the Master for what has seemed like a miracle to us. We have these two grants, and Nick will present details about one and I the other. But the foundational financial change for our enterprise and its future was wholly changed by the generosity of the foundation. Nick has supervised part of this, and I the other. I'll ask him to present our work with one of the grants.
Thank you. Good to be here with you all today. In order to connect with a younger generation of scholars and publish their articles in our journal, we created an essay prize. Thanks to the generosity of 1521, of course, we are giving away $5,000 each year to one essay, beginning last year and continuing this year and 8 years into the future. The essay contest is open to young scholars who are PhD candidates, in other words, those who are writing their dissertations currently, and or scholars who have earned their PhD within the last 5 years. So we've reached out to Friends of Lutheran Quarterly and tried to spread the news about this as far and wide as we can, and we'd be delighted if those of you here today would carry this news to any young scholars or potential future scholars. This essay contest will be going on for quite a while. We thank you for that. The first year was quite successful. We received a total of 12 essays from authors that would have qualified for it. Now, in creating this contest, we did not create a new feature in the quarterly or anything like that. We did not change the standards at all. These essays are subject to the same peer review process as anything published in Lutheran Quarterly. And of the 12 essays, 11 of them did not make it through the peer review process. However, the authors were given valuable feedback from their peer reviewers if they want to resubmit these at other publications, and we're hoping that they learn more about the process and what it takes to get an article published and will resubmit with us in the future. There was one essay that made it through the peer review process that we published last year, and by default, that essay was the inaugural winner of the Lutheran Quarterly 1521 essay, and that was written by John Hoyam. Many of you are familiar with John. He spoke at the 1517 conference in October. I'm just going to read the abstract from the winning article in the spring 2024 issue of Lutheran Quarterly. This article takes up Robert Jensen's theology of culture. According to Jensen, the church is a heavenly culture of its own alongside various worldly cultures. The church therefore presents a rival agenda for human social life conformed to a distinct Christian ethics and polity. Jensen's brand of ecumenical ecclesiology has also been leveraged against the challenge of modern secularity. However, this article contends that Jensen's ecumenical vision overinflates the doctrine of the church by assigning culture to it. Jensen's ecclesiology risks the particularity of the various cultures, languages, and contexts in which the gospel is proclaimed. To redistribute the contents of ecumenical ecclesiology and its theology of culture into the doctrine of creation, this article culminates with an examination of Martin Luther's theology and that of the Lutheran confessions. So it's an interesting article, and it does what I think in the sort of Furdy school we haven't been the greatest at doing, which is bringing Furdy's theology into other theological discussions. Now, obviously, Jensen was Lutheran and a contemporary of Furdy, but not someone that Furdy engaged with too much particularity. And Hoyam's concentration here on the first article brings Furdy's theology into that. What does it mean? Well, it gives freedom. It gives freedom for the first article to actually happen without being sucked up and cannibalized by the church itself. So a very interesting article. And this year we have already had one qualifying essay that will be published in the spring edition of 2025 on Martin Luther, Wendell Berry, and creatureliness by a PhD candidate at Concordia St. Louis. Thanks again.
And we encourage you to pass the word and encourage submissions. The format is the same as mentioned in our website for any submissions to Lutheran Quarterly to be brought to my attention, and my email address is there on our website as well. We have some brochures for some of you who might not be familiar with Lutheran Quarterly. We have some sample issues as well. You'll hear more this afternoon on the panel. This is our first issue, the first year and the first number from the spring of 1987. Now that speaks to our age, I guess, the longevity of doing quarterly issues for that many years. In 2002, we started our book series. Lutheran Quarterly Books was published by Erdman's. There's a Ferdy story to the background of why Erdman's as well, but it came home in more recent years in 2016 to Fortress, and published by Augsburg Fortress Press. And we've had Gerhard Ferdy's works in mind all along. The first issue, this issue, has as its first essay our charter statement, Radical Lutheranism by Gerhard Ferdy. Since we had published him quite often, and book series as well. One of the major ones was edited by Mattis and Paulson and Hopman, called The Essential Ferdy. We don't have lots of copies of that, but we have one. We could show you a copy of that if you'd like to see that. And so it continued through the decades, and Ferdy and the editor at the time, Oliver Olson, passed on to me after a decade of editorial leadership, the head of the editorial team to be the editor of Lutheran Quarterly, with a precedent that we should publish the translations of another theologian who has made a mark in the same direction, Oswald Bayer. We have published more essays by Oswald Bayer than any other author. 2 books. This culminates in July of this year with the publication of his Mother Lode, his original volume, a large volume called Promissio, Martin Luther's reformational theology of the promise. Bayer is known for this, and we recommend this to you, and the book is coming out, and I hope that you'll hear more about Bayer's theology in the years to come. The promise is this word of God that you've been hearing about today, and you know from Ferdy as well and Nestigan, the word that makes things happen, the word that creates its own reality, the word that gives freedom because it gives forgiveness. The promise for you, for the forgiveness of sin. That's the message that gives freedom. Bayer's entire corpus is based on this interpretation of Luther, which is an interpretation of Paul and the scriptures. The book was difficult to translate. It's taken a long time and a lot of work, but it's coming out in July. I want to commend that and his name to all of you. One last point about Lutheran Quarterly itself, and then another word of thanks about the specific endowment. Being around now for 40 years, we're known in many quarters, and people say, oh yeah, I know Lutheran Quarterly. But the question is, do you subscribe? It's nice to be known. It's nice to be appreciated. But we really believe that our labors are worth your time to read, to have a subscription, to read the historical detail and the theological drive in some of these articles. Book reviews alone are the attractive feature for many of our subscribers, 40 pages on average, 18 to 20 different books in Lutheran history and theology are reviewed there in every issue. So we encourage your subscription as well as your appreciation for and your interest in Lutheran Quarterly. The other grant that the Quarterly has received has helped to expand our endowment exponentially so that we'll have proceeds from this endowment for stipendiary support to certain staff people. This allows us, going forward into the future, after myself in the chair as editor, to have stipendiary support that is sufficient to help. There are no longer as many professorships with faculty secretaries and assistants and so on in the Lutheran world in general. And so having a stipend and some expense account and so on will be essential, we think, and is essential for certain of our staff members. Just a sidelight here, my first trip to Southern California, our original treasurer, named in these early issues, Earl Ensberg from San Diego. Earl had a dream. We called it California Dreamin'. Because it seemed so outlandish, he said, if we had an endowment that could generate income to give stipends to an editor, to a support staff person, it would stabilize our operation. Well, yes, but for 30 years, we were a shoestring operation that could hardly pay the bills. And we were entirely volunteer labor. And even we then who were volunteering our time also were the donors who bailed out the budget at the end of the year so we could pay the printer and the postage. Until 1521. And this beginning of a staged, a phased endowment gifts that allow us to stabilize the operation and have stipends and therefore have freedom to be creative about other programmatic aspects. And you'll hear more about that in the afternoon panel. Some new ideas, new possibilities, because our finances have been stabilized thanks to this foundation. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is 1517. We're given 2 grants. One was to create some new academy courses, and then 1521 has been looking at a focus on Gen Z. How do you get those people to stop swiping and focus on something? So we've had a couple of grants that have been focused on that. So we have Scott Keith with us today.
Well, good morning. Good morning. I should have Steve Paulson come up here because then we wouldn't stick to our 10 minutes, but it'd be fine. I was also wondering, what is the age on this $5,000 for a journal article, like under 60? No, younger than that? All right. I'm from 1517. Our mission is pretty simple. It kind of goes like this. We exist to declare and defend that you are forgiven and free on account of Christ alone. Now, to that end, to kind of introduce what we do broadly, I talked the video guys into playing our What is 1517 video, which will just be right over here.
Throughout history, Christians have often made theology about what we do for God. We pray, we fast, and we obey, hoping to make things right between us and our perfect Creator. Yet, even our best is not sufficient. Our lives reveal that we can never do, say, or think rightly enough to find the peace and respite we desperately desire. Fortunately, God's promises tell a different story. Our God tells us that theology is not about what we do for God. Theology is the proclamation of what He has done for us. He comes to save both the poor and the rich, the almighty and the weak, the guilty and the innocent. His love isn't bound to a single moment during our lifetime, but instead bursts forth through the forgiveness and redemption He bestows on each of us again and again in word, water, wine, and bread. God tells us He's come to save everyone through His Son. And because Christ is for everyone, Christ is for you. This gospel gives assurance and consolation to all Christians. At 1517, we distribute theological and apologetic resources to proclaim Christ for you to those who have never heard the gospel, as well as those who need to hear it again. 1517 is for the pastor as he prepares his weekly sermon to preach Christ crucified to sinner saints. 1517 is for the church in need of law and gospel resources and the encouragement to proclaim the free forgiveness of sin on account of Christ. 1517 is for the non-Christian who doubts the reliability of the Gospels and yet is intrigued by Christ all the same. And 1517 is for the weary Christian who needs to hear once again that their sin is forgiven and that Christ has died for them. Christ for you is central to theology. Christ for you is the heart of the gospel. Christ for you is the very reason God sees us perfectly righteous now and always. Join us as we continue to proclaim Christ died for everyone, including you.
So all that and many other great videos like that, including some I'll talk about in a minute, can be found at our website, which is pretty simple. It's just 1517.org, just 1517.org. We won on that front, by the way. Again, our mission is to declare and defend that you are forgiven and free on account of Christ alone. It's often asked, well, how do you do that? We do it through basically things we used to call projects. Now we kind of put them into different departments. The big one for us that we're pretty good at and that we've been doing for quite a while is we have a podcast network. We have about 20 podcasts on this podcast network, and we're finishing up our 2024 annual report, so I've got some numbers for you here. We did over 7 million downloads in our podcast network over the course of this past year. For those of you who aren't good at math, that's a lot. We have a speakers bureau where we send speakers out nearly every weekend from and among our 30 available speakers on our speakers network. And we host 2 conferences a year, one in San Diego, one in Bentonville, Arkansas. Between the speakers network and the 2 conferences, we've interacted on a personal, face-to-face, one-to-one level with over 10,000 people this year. We have a project that's called The Craft of Preaching, which is designed to help pastors essentially prepare their sermons every week. There's parts of this that include video. There's articles from different homiletics profs that are part of this. Steve Paulson's other podcast, his underrated podcast, Preaching the Text, is part of that too. And through that, we've helped 90,000 pastors that we know of prepare sermons over the course of 2024. Our web traffic on our native website is going over 2 million this year. That's pretty big for us. We have more than 1,000 resources that are published every year regularly on that website between blogs, podcasts, videos, various kinds of longer form articles. And then finally, and I'll say last but not least, we also run a publishing house and have been running a publishing house for, Steve could correct me, a little over a decade now, I believe. And again, I'm not the expert on this part by a long shot, but I believe we now have over 160 books in our catalogs of books that we've published, 160 books in that catalog. The latest of which, this is kind of serendipitous, I don't see where he went, is Mark Mattis's new book that'll be coming out, I think in a couple weeks. Can be pre-ordered now, called Ditching the List or Ditching the Checklist. Okay, I got it, good. Look at me. On the 1521 front, 1521 has funded a couple of different projects for us. I'm going to go with the most recent one and then kind of go back to the one that's a little bit older, but that we're still working on. This past year, they asked for grant submissions for organizations to kind of do outreach and ministry to the Gen Z generation. Through our talks in the process of that grant, it kind of, Gen Z is kind of an amorphous blob as to who they actually are, as are millennials and the whole 9 yards. And so basically young people, right? So we're going after people younger than me, people that would qualify for the $5,000, right? That's who we're going after. And basically, this is the part where they really wanted my son Caleb to be here because he's the one that sold them on us doing this. I tried to sell him and they said, you're 52, so you don't know anything. But I will tell you what we've done so far. We received some money last year that was kind of like to get us spooled up to do some video projects. The first way we've leaned into that a little bit is my wife calls him our John the Baptist. I just kind of call him, if you met him, you'd know why he's John the, he's kind of out in the woods in camel hair cloth and eating locust and honey. His name is Mark Jasa, but what he really does is he goes on to various college campuses, and he's the guy that sits there and on these, secular, if not pagan, university campuses kind of is a take-all-comers kind of guy for the gospel. And it is apologetics, but it's not apologetics in the sense where he's necessarily always arguing with them about like the veracity of the text. It's apologetics really in this nature that most of the questions he gets are sort of cultural questions about, I can't believe because of hypocrisy, I can't believe because of this, or what do you mean by Jesus died for my sins? And he does real law gospel preaching with them. He's a pastor at his core. He's a pastor in Pasadena. And so he does this. And lately, he's been filmed doing this, been filming him doing this. And we've been publishing those, as have the publications of those been picked up by other groups publishing them. And these videos have really taken off from him. Some of them are short, some of them are long, some of him are like really getting people that are hostile to kind of have a light bulb go on. Many of these videos have already surpassed, like, I think, again, Steve could correct me, I think it's like about 400,000 downloads per video on these. They've really taken off. So we're leaning into that. And then we've just started production on filming 15-minute shorts with various people. It won't be a one-personality thing, with various people answering questions that we've kind of done a survey and figured out that the Gen Z are asking that are priority issues for them. So sort of short, quippy answers to them. Notable videos are going to include like, why are people quitting Christianity? Should you quit Christianity? Addressing the recent sort of surveys that say that Gen Z is not only unhappy, but extremely lonely. And why is that? This idea of some of the cultural questions that, come up when you ever have discussions about homosexuality or transgender stuff. Love means love. Even dipping our toe into answering questions of climate change, which should be, not controversial at all. So, we're also working on training, and much like what LQ is trying to do, working and training future sort of evangelical young theologians. Because one of the things we realize is that 1517 exists because older theologians, shall I say, sort of trained younger ones, and now as those younger ones are now my age, what are we doing to kind of bring up a next generation? Fewer of us are in universities than in the past, so what can we do in that area? And so we're really leaning into developing that junior fellows program and engaging some Gen Z budding theologians that we know to help us by not only writing articles, but also appearing in these videos to their own generation, answering these questions. So that's what we're doing on the Gen Z front. Caleb put a little thing in here for me to say, most of these videos will go up onto YouTube, not on our native 1517 site. They will go up onto our 1517 YouTube page. Lots of great resources there too. If you're a YouTuber type of person, just type in, again, 1517, guarantee you will be the first thing that comes up. And he put in here, it's really important for people to know that YouTube should be utilized in this way because over 238 million, there are over 238 million YouTube users in the United States. That's most of the country, right? Most people, 62% of people that use YouTube use it on a daily basis. I mean, I wake up with YouTube. So it's YouTube and coffee for me. And then YouTube's discovery algorithm is a powerful tool for reaching audiences who may not discover content through other web searches. And this is just a reality. The idea that you can sort of tune your page to be found when somebody searches a thing is great, and it's a thing that we still do and that everybody should still do. But really, within YouTube, the algorithm can really help people bring that up. The more you get hits, the more likely you are to be found, and so going that way. On our academy front, 1517 has for a while now produced high-level, we often say sort of collegiate level or introductory collegiate level online academies on various educational topics within Christianity. And then 1521 came alongside us a couple years ago to help us fund some of these. Since they have, we've produced 4 online academies, kind of going from oldest to newest. One is called Christ in the Old Testament with Chad Bird. The other one is called Faith and Reason with Adam Francisco. Another one is called The Early Church with Bruce Hillman. That one is absolutely outstanding. If you're like me and you knew almost nothing about the early church, I can now be an expert on any podcast they ask me on. So check that out. And then the last one that we just did is on the Inklings by Sam Schultheis. He's a pastor up in the Pacific Northwest and an Inklings expert. If you don't know who the Inklings are, it's sort of this like gathering of really literary people in Oxford in the early 20th century, early to mid 20th century. People like J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and people like C.S. Lewis, author of the Chronicles of Narnia and Mere Christianity and many other Christian works. And they would come together to sort of talk about what they were working on and to get together. And that friendship produced some of the greatest works of what you might call sort of Christianity for people that are looking to engage theological topics from a literary perspective, and have brought many, many, many people to the faith throughout the years. And so Sam's video academy on that is excellent. The academies are not just videos or study guides that come along with them. You can take little quizzes, it's a whole thing. So go check those out. Those are on our website at 1517.org. If you do want to take an academy, you do have to sign up, because while we don't charge you for it, we do want all of your personal data just like everybody else. So, all right, I'll be around if you have any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is from St. Paul Lutheran Seminary, where the foundation gave a grant in honor and memory of our good friend James Nestigan.
Good morning. It's still morning, right? Good morning. My name is Julie Smith, and I'm here on behalf of St. Paul Lutheran Seminary, where I serve in a variety of capacities, these days mostly as the preaching professor there. I was a student of Jim Nestigan and Gerhard Ferde at Luther Seminary at the tail end of the time when you could only talk about them together. It was always Nestigan and Ferde, and students didn't really separate them other than to kind of imagine Ferde was the theologian and Jim was the preacher, pastor, or Jim was doing what Gerhard was describing, kind of an oversimplification that students are prone to that doesn't fully appreciate what either of them was doing, I think. But that was my first introduction to Jim Nestigan, was as his student. And then about a decade later, he became a co-founder with John Jensen and I of St. Paul Lutheran Seminary. We are a school that's entirely online. We have because I'm mostly just teaching these days, I don't have all the numbers always, but we have about 30 students in the US and another 30 in India. And then we have, off and on, we have students in Mexico and Central and South America. But we are a school that's really dedicated to the preparation of preachers. What started as a financial necessity that we have come to really value is the fact that all of our instructors, all of our faculty are embedded in congregations. They have a degree in their field, but they are serving either as parish pastors or are very involved in a local congregation. And part of what that has meant for St. Paul that I think has been a real gift to our students is that our theological commitments never can drift too far away from the church, which I think easily happens in theological education. If your church history professor has to cancel class to do a funeral, that has a kind of impact on how you understand what this work is about. And so we are grateful for that. About a year after, or a little less than a year after St. Paul was founded, Jim came with this idea that he wanted to do a text study of the lectionary text for the coming week. And he had done this at Luther in person, of course, with people, pastors in the area, and he wanted to do it again. And I will say, I I underestimated Jim, and I underestimated his former students. I didn't want to advertise it because I thought, he's not going to want to do this every week, for years. And he did. He did it every week for the rest of his life. His last recording was the week that he died. And he hated to miss it. This became actually a little bit of a source of strife. He would try to do it when they were on vacation. He would try to do it from Germany. And so I got to know Carolyn well because I was his sub when they were off somewhere. And she was always appreciative if I would pinch hit for him because he just wanted to do it. He wanted to provide a resource for preachers to dig into the text for the coming week. And so as a result of that, and I should say that by the time he died, there were around over 500 subscribers to his weekly text study of about 45 minutes where he looked at all of the texts. And usually, because of who he was, of course, the emphasis was on the gospel text. The rest he understood to be supporting texts, except he really liked the Psalms. And so the Psalms got quite a lot of play in those recordings. So we have, as a result of that, about 400 hours of recordings of Jim talking about the Bible in the way that Jim talked about the Bible. And so the grant that we are so grateful to 1521 for is to make those recordings more publicly accessible to anyone who wants to see them. They're currently in a rather proprietary software system that we have to pull them out of. That's where we are right now, is in the kind of technical side of pulling them out of one system so that we can make them available publicly. Our plan is to put them on YouTube and edit them that way. But so far, the work has all been technical. The next step is going to be editorial. And we will have to sort out the question of whether you let Jim be Jim or you think a little bit about, one of the questions is that we have to come to terms with is when his grandchildren watch these videos, is that what they're going to want to hear always? I'll leave the rest to your imagination. But so that's the next step. And I have not been involved in the technical side. I will be involved in the editorial side, and that will be part of the delay because I still can't watch videos of Jim. So we haven't gotten there yet. But the question I think that I am interested in as we engage in this process and this project is a generation from now when people don't have a personal connection to Jim. How are they going to receive these videos? How are they going to hear what he's doing there? As I was saying, I was a student at a time when it was Nestigan and Ferdy together, and what would happen is people would write down everything Ferdy said and then would try to imitate Jim, which just is don't do it. Like, don't try to imitate Jim. It's a disaster. But I think part of the power of Jim's work came out of knowing him too, came out of the way that he knew people and could connect with people personally. And I do wonder what that will look like a generation from now if somebody pulls up this video and thinks, who on earth is this person? And what is he talking about? Because it's not straight exegesis like you might expect from a biblical scholar. It's not preaching exactly. It's not just storytelling, but that's the part that people remember. And I think that will be the value, I think, of this project, of these recordings being public, is kind of digging into that question of what is this that he was doing? When Jim died, I was noticing all the kind of tributes to him on Facebook and all the people commenting on how influential he was to them. And so, as I mentioned, I teach preaching, and so there are kind of two things that go with that for people who know that I teach preaching. The first is they assume I'm critical of everyone's preaching. And the second is that that's true. And so I was reading all these tributes to Jim from people whose preaching I had heard, and people talking about how deeply influential he was on them, and thinking, I wouldn't have guessed that. I can't hear it. I don't see it. And so I think to really dig into the question of what was he doing? Do we understand it as well as we think we do? And I don't think we do. I think we appreciate and love this character that is Jim Nestigan, who is larger than life in all kinds of ways. But to think carefully about what he was doing and why it worked and how it worked, I think will be the great gift of this project that we are undertaking with these recordings and making them more available, fully available to the public. And we are just very grateful for your support in making that happen. Thanks.
Thank you. We are looking forward to it also. Next is Lutheran Church of the Master, it's the very church that you're in now. And Pastor Russ Lackey will talk about the grant for the preaching series.
Good morning. I am really thankful to be here and to have you here. In many ways, we've been connected in ways that we don't even understand. Obviously in baptism, but the fact that like 1517 got a grant to do an academy that Grandview used for an online course is just wild. And even more connections with many of you, like I got to see Chris face to face, and we spoke maybe 10 years ago. And so I truly am thankful to be here with all of you. I'm also thankful because when you show up at an event like this, sometimes people bring you things. And I got a gift from Grandview, and it was from Trisha's husband. And it's a shirt that says Ferdy Fan Club, and here it is. But in the bottom, it says Nerdy for Ferdy. Scott, I think you wish you had that line, Nerdy for Ferdy. I like that. What's that? That's yours, I know. Well, you haven't copyrighted it yet. Eric's a copyright attorney. Let's get on this. Quick story. I'm from this area, at least Southern California. And when I was 16, in 1994, a girl invited me to a Lutheran church. When I walked in and had people stand up, sit down, and the pastor was wearing a robe, I thought I was in a cult, and I prayed that God would protect me from these people. I would have left, but the girl was cute, and I wanted to go on the date afterwards. So I stayed, and as I stayed, the pastor opened up scripture and preached about Jesus. He handed over the goods. Changed my whole life. One sermon, pointing to Jesus Christ, changed everything. At that time, I didn't know what would happen, what God was going to do through one sermon. God knew. What I also didn't understand was that in 1994, that same year when I got baptized, was the last year Lutheran Church, the ELCA at least, and I think it's across the board in America, that we're growing. It started shrinking from that point on. And it was shrinking, mostly a demographic issue, but it started declining. In Orange County in the 90s, 80s, 90s, this became the county of the fastest shrinking Lutheran church in the country. And the reason is because Lutherans produced engineers, and a bunch of people who worked for Douglas and Boeing moved to Seattle, moved to Houston. This area decimated. People in this area understand that and know that. Now, fast forward, I'm at seminary, 1998, and it's the fall of seminary, and here I'm talking with Carl Volz. And I'm at a church service with him afterwards, who was Mark's father-in-law, so all these connections. And Carl said that in the Twin Cities, there used to be a dozen five-star preachers. he said, now I can't list one. This is 1998, right before he died. And he said, the only good preacher we have in the Twin Cities is a Puritan, John Piper. He goes, I'm never going to listen to him, but he's the only good preacher the cities has. And so it made me begin to wonder, is there a correlation between our decline in people and our decline in preaching? Do we actually have preachers? I mean, we know that we're supposed to deliver the goods, but is anyone delivering the goods at all? And so in coming out and applying for this grant, I wanted to give an opportunity to get preachers, people to come into this congregation and deliver the goods. In part, it's because I wanted a weekend off, so that's a good thing to do. But really, I need a preacher too. And so when Mark Mattis came, Dr. Paulson came, when Jason Michele came, I needed a sermon. And as pastors, we don't hear enough good sermons. This congregation got to hear those sermons. This is set up so that we can have good preaching. Dave Zoll, I'm glad that you're going to preach tomorrow. My wife's really happy about that. She goes, I want to laugh, and you're a bad storyteller, Russ. So I'm glad that Dave is here. But in setting up this grant, we also realized something. It's hard to find Lutheran preachers. I mean, that's why we have to lean on a Methodist and Episcopalian. Like, where are the Lutherans at? And that should be a haunting question for all of us. Where are the Lutheran preachers at? I mean, we have to like call around and find out and look under little leaves and find them. Somehow we don't know where the good Lutheran preachers are. And so this grant is designed to begin to develop a network. And when someone comes and who's a good preacher, we say, who do you know? And can we actually get more of these people in? Also, our hope is to get some young preachers, give them a chance to come out here also, to give them a little bit of, to lift them up and allow them to proclaim and get that experience of being flown in and having a nice meal and getting paid something to preach a sermon and just to go through that experience. And our hope through all of it is just simply to begin the task once again of raising up preachers, to acknowledge preachers and letting them just deliver the goods. I will say across this country, there are good Lutheran preachers. I know that. I just don't know who they are. And neither do you, or you might know one. And so the part of this grant is designed to do that work. Now, we've learned a couple lessons. One thing that we have to do in this area is actually cultivate people to want good preachers and to hear good preaching. So we are doing that work of trying to invite students from Concordia University. So close. They have good professors. They haven't shown up yet for our preaching conference. So how do we get them? And so that's a lot of work that we're trying to do, because I think 20 years ago, it was easier out here to invite someone to preach in the whole sort of area people would show up for. But right now, they're not interested, or we don't know how to communicate it to them. So we're learning lessons as we're going. This is a 5-year grant that we hope will extend. But in our hope is that we want to have a list of good preachers. We want to again train this area to want to hear good preaching. So just have to expose them to that and see what happens. And it's really a beautiful thing. One more connection in all this, because we have this grant, and because of my work at Grandview, Grandview University has a Lilly grant. It's called the Iowa Preachers Project. And Ken Jones, who was that first Ferdy professor, connection there, was out here with about 12 pastors, and they're trying to receive the goods and share the goods. David Zoll was there just 2 weeks ago. Poor David, he keeps flying back and forth across the whole country. But you were teaching them and you were sharing the good news with them. And I just listened, and it was so good. So this grant is designed, again, to get Lutherans to preach, to record it, to share it, to send it out, to get this area opening their ears again so they might hear and be shaped, so that they too might be changed when the goods are shared. I want to end with this last story, and it cuts deeply to my own heart. I have 2 daughters in high school, and when we left California about 13 years ago, I felt like the high school kids at that time were churched, or at least exposed to Christianity. Coming back in this area, my daughter's friends know nothing of the church. They know nothing of the gospel. They know nothing of faith. They know nothing of Christ. They have not been told. And so we're doing a lot of work at the house, at the parsonage, because it's really hard for them to show up at church, but they're on church property when they're at my house, which is really nice. And so we buy a lot of soda for them and begin to ask them questions. And I realize I have a youth group, not here, but at my house. And just beginning to share the good news. And I go in there and I say, hey, this is what I preached on today. I'm only going to give you, it's going to take 2 minutes. Then afterwards, they say, did you really say that? I said, I did. Why don't you come on Sunday? Well, we can't do that yet. But it's beginning to get the word into their ears and letting the word transform them. And the hope of this grant, and why I'm thankful for the foundation, is that you've set up a possibility, a chance, an opportunity so that preachers can preach. And selfishly, I receive the benefit of it. I know the congregation does as well. But prayerfully, it'll be something that will help change this region and hopefully continue to draw people into not only this congregation, but for them to be transformed by the gospel. In closing, if you know any good preachers, please let me know. And if there are any young preachers that would like an opportunity, we'll fly them out. And then if you are cold and you're a good preacher in the middle of the winter and want to come out to California, we'll bring you out to preach as well. We want to hear the good news. So thank you very much. Thank you, Foundation, for your wonderful generosity.
Next is Mockingbird Industries and Dave Zoll. And again, back to our reach out to Gen Z, and that's what we've asked them to work on.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here. I realize a little bit, maybe one of the unintentional but byproducts, but an exciting one of gathering us all together is I'm sort of getting pumped up about all that's going on. It's really exciting to hear. I didn't really realize that was part of what was going on. I want to sort of go out on the field and really just give it my all offensively, not defensively. But thank you for that warm introduction, and thank you for making it possible for us to be here. I find it really is an honor and a privilege to get to be in a room with many people I know and respect, but some new friends as well. Mockingbird, some of you know. If you don't, it was founded in 2007 by a group of misfit Episcopalians who'd been zapped by Lutheran theology. We didn't really realize there was a whole Lutheran world out there. That's how sequestered many of us are in our little denominational ghettos. But for us, the motivating theological concerns were the distinction between the law and the gospel, the theology of the cross, and then the bondage of the will. And so we started talking about those things online, and it was like a dog whistle. And all of a sudden, we started to make some very strange friends. Just kidding. You're beautiful. This is Southern California. Trust me. It's not everyone looks like this. But Mockingbird, when we started, those were the concerns, and we were founded in New York City, where I'm from originally, and we were my background was in youth ministry, and so we wanted to reach young people, especially young people who kind of in their 20s would go to New York and check out of their faith or check out of the church, and maybe return when they had kids, but maybe not, who knows? And to do that, it was 2007, you had to sort of be active online. We were doing other things, a lot of in-person stuff and a little bit of publication. But at the time, I mean, this was not that long ago. We're not 20 years old yet. But at the time, we would approach churches and mission boards and say, there's this thing called the internet, and actually ministry is happening there. And, would you, please, would you fund us? And they'd look at you like, well, that's just a distraction. No one takes that seriously. Please leave. And they didn't say that. People were very kind. They just were confused. Looking back, what it was that Mockingbird was doing is we were starting a platform for digital ministry and what's now known as content creation. I hate the phrase, but that's the phrase we have. And it didn't really exist beforehand. The COVID pandemic, for all of the terrible things that happened, one thing it did do was it dragged the church into the 21st century and made sure that we were live streaming and we were trying to meet people where they were. And so for the younger generations, and I'm 45, I started this when I was 28, but for the younger generations, the internet's not, as you know, it's not a distraction or an escape from life. It is life. That's where life actually happens. And so we realized we could either be there talking about God, talking about justification, talking about the gospel, or you could just seed the ground entirely. And so we started the difficult and confounding work of trying to be an online witness. And we did that through a variety of means. Of course, there was a very active website, which is still very active. Conferences, podcasts, social media, books, the whole 9 yards. That one of the things the internet did, as we know, is it democratized a lot of those channels so that you could all of a sudden create books without a publishing house, for better or worse. You could reach people through podcasts. And what happened was when in 2007, it was part of the blogging boom. And that was like the front door of the organization. And then slowly it migrated into podcasts. And then now, very clearly, if you want, podcasts are still important. I know it's a trial to do laundry without a podcast, or at least if you're me. But short form video is where if you want to reach people, that's where they are. That's especially Gen Z. I think when we were applying for this grant, Luke did some research. Luke back there, Luke Rowland, who's our development guy. And we realized that I think 70%, Gen Z, like 70% of them look first to short form video when they're looking for goods or services. That's where they go first. YouTube, you read the comment sections on YouTube. That's where you get, because authenticity is what people are interested in, not marketing. And the comment sections under Amazon products are where people are actually going. We started in New York, by the way. We moved to Central Virginia in 2010, where I currently live with my wife and 3 boys. So what else to tell you about Mockingbird before I talk about short form video more? From the beginning, what I've been told that we do well is we are culturally fluent and not oppositional in our stance towards culture, because I like culture. I happen to be an enormous music fan, and I like watching movies too. So you had a certain approach to culture from aspects of the Christian world, which was very oppositional and was increasingly entrenched. And that just didn't come naturally to a guy whose pastor father was taking him to horror movies when he was 10. I realized that was eccentric, but I didn't realize it at the time. I've come to realize that we occupy theologically, denominationally. Mockingbird exists on the border of the crumbling mainline Protestant church and the sort of softer edges of evangelicalism. And so we've ended up attracting all these misfit Christians to us who the mainline is just reeks of decay. And then the evangelical world feels triumphalistic and all wrapped up in money, and we just don't trust it. So we found ourselves in this strange no man's land, and that's where we exist. And it's an interesting place. It's always the ground is always shifting, but that's where you can be nimble when you're a small organization. That's what we've tried to be. We've also been told that we do use a lot of humor in our work, and the worst thing about if people think that they're funny and aren't. So we're not trying to be funny. It just happens. I've got a very silly family that has given me this kind of whimsy or something. And like calls out to like. Anyway, as we've aged, we've noticed that as I've aged, I've noticed that our audience has aged. And I'm not the only person that works for Mockingbird. We have 16 people on our payroll. 6 of them are full-time. About 10 of them are part-time. But what was once a sort of a 20 and 30-somethings, is now, I've got some gray hair, like almost exclusively gray hair. So how do we reach the younger people and who are such digital natives and for whom short-form video is the go-to? Well, we need help. And so we asked 1521 for help. And that is what we're in the prospect of doing. Now, I don't want to say that we jump into this without thinking. Some of you know Jonathan Haidt, who wrote this book, The Anxious Generation. He was an early speaker at a Mockingbird conference in 2012. It's been fun to watch. We have conferences in New York, and it's been edifying to me to watch our speakers go on to such national acclaim. So Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man, but the end of history, if you listen to that podcast, he was an early discovery of ours. Alyssa Wilkinson is now the head film critic for the New York Times. She was, Oliver Berkman is national. They all sort of came through Mockingbird, which is a cool thing to see. But Jonathan Haidt says the internet and social media is making us into nervous wrecks and deeply miserable and splintering our lives and our attention. And I think he's right. So how do you then make redemptive use of these tools? Well, you better produce good content, but it also better be authentic is the word that they always use, which I don't like the word, but that's the buzzword. And so that's what we approached 1521 to help us with. We had a part-time social media director that we've been able to make full-time. We did a national search actually for a new person, able to buy new computers, new cameras, and start boosting our content more often on social media because, as you know, if you don't pay to play, no one sees your content, no matter how good it is. So we're onboarding that person. We're very happy with her. And she is now just upping the amount of attention and excitement around short form video. And we're seeing a good return on it. I hope that it also brings people into sort of embodied relationships and into the church. And that's why we continue to hold conferences and continue to always work with pastors. Russ just mentioned the Iowa Preachers Project, which we are sort of partners of, Mockingbird's a partner of, and we're trying to help all sorts of preachers. We're not interested in ordaining anyone, but if you're ordained, we will try to preach the gospel. So Church of the Master was kind enough to have us here last week, and that was really fun. Lily gave us money to do that. So that's what one of the other things I would say I was struck by Dr. Paulson's use of the word populize. That is what Mockingbird is attempting to do. We are really operating we're operating outside the Lutheran world, but we are bringing those distinctives, I like to believe, into conversations where they might not otherwise be. I've published 3 books under national presses under my own name, and I've been smuggling Gerhard Furtian the entire time, right? And Paulson keeps getting footnotes. And there's my new book, which comes out at the end of April. Jim Nestingen has there's a whole long story I tell about Jim Nestingen, which kind of cracks me up. And I Free to Be, the catechism, which is so great, the youth catechism, that ends one of the chapters. Now, the people that are reading this don't know anything about those people. So I hope that will be one way in which we can populize in unexpected ways. We're going to make mistakes. We do it imperfectly. We color outside the lines sometimes, but I like to think that without doing that, we're not going to get anywhere. So on behalf of our board of directors, I want to say thank you so much to 1521 for taking a chance and encouraging us. You guys really encouraged us to apply. I'm not a very organized person, and so to do something like this, it was just, the encouragement was really a beautiful thing. We talk about a word of grace from the outside. Well, you guys gave us one, so thank you so much, and we look forward to getting to know people while we're here. Thanks for listening.
One more. And last but certainly not least, we have Heinz Heisterman from the Lutheran Theological Seminary in South Africa, and we're very glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be here. And I just realized today and last night already, there are so many people here with whom I have exchanged emails and ideas in that way. And I finally get to meet them in person, which is wonderful. There are people whose books I've read, and now I can get to meet them in person. Organizations whose materials we are using at our seminary. And now somehow at this event, we're all getting connected, which is wonderful. And it's wonderful it is possible, even though we are far away in South Africa. When I was listening to Dr. Paulson speak earlier, I kind of started feeling sorry for my students because they have to listen to me. I'll tell you a little bit of our seminary in South Africa. The Lutheranism came to South Africa in 1854, when the first missionaries came from Germany. Lutheran missionaries came to South Africa, which is just over 170 years ago. And my wife and I, we speak German, but our forefathers came to South Africa. Now, we don't have any family or connection to Germany really anymore. But somehow we still attend a German congregation. We go to German church services on Sunday. But these German missionaries who came in 1854, they started working amongst the Africans in South Africa. And of course, after a while, they realized they would be much more effective if they trained the local people to help them share the gospel. So for a long time, there were some missionary who trained one or two people who served as evangelists, who trained them, but there was not a real seminary. It took until 1941 for a formal seminary to be formed. But in 1941, it was a small seminary only for one Lutheran church body in South Africa. So they had maybe a handful of students at the most. But things then changed in the year 2000. Before that, the seminary was in a rural area, far away from any big city. And in the year 2000, it moved to Pretoria. And then it became a very international seminary. And Pretoria is, by the way, the city where Elon Musk, the most famous South African, grew up in. So since 2000, our seminary has grown a lot. We have had some years, there have been up to 40 students, but at the moment we have only space for 25. And every year we have to turn away students because we don't have space to accommodate them. Most of the students come from poor backgrounds. If we don't provide space for them to stay and feed them and give the books to them, they would never have the opportunity to study and become pastors and serve in the church. So our seminary is almost totally dependent on donations. And what makes it expensive is we have, if, for example, a student from the Congo, Sudan wants to come and study at our seminary, those churches have no money. The pastors don't get paid at all. So we have to raise the money to get them to come to our seminary. And over these last 20 years or so, we have had students from 15 different African countries. Some of our former students are bishops and church leaders, seminary professors leading seminaries in other African countries. In South Africa, no one knows the exact number, but estimated there are maybe around 1 million Lutherans. But there's only one seminary, which is our seminary. And if you look at our neighboring countries, also most of them, they don't have their own seminaries. It's simply too expensive for the churches. They don't have the funds or the personnel to run a seminary. So if they cannot send their students to our seminary in South Africa, there's really no place elsewhere where they could be going to get their theological training. So for the last 2 years, we've been trying to get permission from the city council to erect a new building so that we can take in more students. Because we strongly believe that the Lutheran Church in Southern Africa should be growing. The Lutheran Church is growing in many African countries. It's growing exponentially, and there's no reason why it should not be happening in the southern part of the African continent also. But for that to happen, we need to have properly trained people. Well, I say that we have had students from 15 different countries, but we've also had students from at least 10 Lutheran church bodies in South Africa. Even larger Lutheran churches in South Africa, they don't have their own seminaries. It makes life very interesting, this mixture from the students from different backgrounds and cultures. I always say there's never a boring day at seminary. You never know what you're going to expect. We instruct the students in English because it's the only language that everyone at least understands a little bit. But there's not a single person whose mother language is English. But somehow it works. And I think sometimes it's a blessing because no one speaks English that well. It's easier to understand for the others. So we have undergone many changes in the last few years because we wanted to get accreditation from the South African government. Because now churches struggle to pay their pastors, and many pastors also have to find work elsewhere. And even if they have an accredited certificate or a diploma from a seminary, it makes them more unemployable if they have to find part-time job elsewhere. But everything in South Africa, takes time. Our application for accreditation was approved in July last year, but we are still waiting for the certificate to be given to us. And also, since our seminary has been in Pretoria, we have regular visitors, guest lecturers mostly from the States, but also from Germany. John Pless, who many of you know, he comes to South Africa. He teaches at our seminary twice a year. He comes for 2 weeks at a time, and he normally brings someone to come with him. And in August, he's bringing Mark Matters to teach with him, and we're very excited about that. And it's really a unique opportunity for our students to have some of the most renowned Lutheran scholars in the world coming to teach to them. And the grant that we've received from the 1521 Foundation really has, like I said, it's expensive to get students from other African countries to us, but it now has made it possible to fund those students to come to our seminary. And once we will hopefully have the new building, we'll be able to get even more students to our seminary. But we also want to start expand our program teach. At the moment, we only teach a 3-year diploma in theology in person. We also want to start offering more courses, more programs, because that's what the churches need. And it's always amazing to see how the Lord provides. For 170 years, our seminary received funding from Germany, because the Germans basically founded the seminary. But because of the decline in Christianity and the numbers of people going to church decreasing, this year is the first year that we are receiving no funding from Germany. And because of the gracious donation from 1521, it makes it possible for us now to continue doing our work. And we are also very proud that one of our former student, he's originally from the Congo, but grew up in South Africa. He's now serving as a youth missionary in Berlin, in Germany. So it took 170 years, but now we are sending missionaries to Germany. And I will just close by sharing now our mission statement. Now, the LTS is a mission agency seeking to graduate multipliers for the Lutheran Church of Africa. Because African churches don't have money to send missionaries anywhere. The pastor is also a missionary in the area in which he is serving. Some of our graduates have started schools, some even clinics, which they use as tools to proclaim the gospel. Some of our students, one of the Congolese students, his son died while he was studying at our seminary, and he could not attend the funeral of his own son. Some of the students really come from difficult situations and circumstances, and often I think I learn more from them than they learn from me. Even in all adversity that they face, they want to serve the church, and even though there's war in the Congo and in Sudan, they don't even think of staying in South Africa. They want to, they say, even if there's war, the people still need to hear the gospel. Now, thank you for the time and for listening to me.
Thank you. Well, mission accomplished. Thank you all for the work you're doing, for coming here and sharing what you're doing and looking at the synergies and looking how we can further the gospel through what's happening.